Hey, 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 hey. I love internet. Hey, hey.
Hey, it's Cinecope. I'm Justin. We're going to be reviewing Robot Jocks today. So, Robot Jocks is a 1989 PG rated 1 hour and 25 minute movie. And what's going on here? So, this is the future in some kind of weird, bizarre way. I think I saw somewhere in there that it was like 2091 range ish. And the plot is basically that humanity is getting sick and tired of waging war with each other. It's getting too destructive. Everything is going to complete shit. And it's alluded that these wars have caused all kinds of environmental problems, social problems. It's basically pushed humanity backwards in time as far as a whole society. So we got to stop this. How do we stop this? We start doing war in a different way. And that way is to basically play mech warrior with each other, and we're going to be fighting singular combat with gigantic robots with all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. The winner of each one of these battles is getting territory. So, like in the movie here, the big fight is over Alaska. Who determines who gets control of Alaska? Well, it's whoever wins the robot battle. So our basic storyline here is we've got Gary Graham as Achilles, and he is a robot jock, and he's a pilot for one of these gigantic robots, and he's aging out. He's so these robot jocks apparently they can only fight 10 times. They're only supposed to fight 10 times. That's what their contract is for. He's already fought 9 times going into the movie, and this is going to be his 10th and final battle. There's a whole bunch of other robot jocks as well, but they've all been killed by Alexander, played by Paul Kuzlo. It's alluded to that there's at least 7 that he's killed, and since we don't see any other similarly aged robot jocks as Gary Graham's character Achilles, I'm forced to assume that Alexander has killed all the rest of them, the current batch of them, I suppose. But Achilles has already completed 9 fights and he's on his 10th, but he's somehow not faced Alexander yet. Anyway, Achilles is aging out and they've got this new crop of robot jocks coming up. Test tube babies, genetically engineered humans that are designed and grown and raised and trained for the specific purpose of being robot jocks. Achilles and his coach, Tex Conway, here played by Michael Aldredge, they're pretty skeptical of the tubies, as they call them. I mean, they're supposed to be, smarter, faster, stronger, better capable humans to be robot jocks, but they don't really appear to be. I mean, in fact, it looks like they repeatedly get their asses kicked. And even though it's alluded to that the enemy in this movie they're called the Confederation, but it's pretty obvious that it's the Soviet Union. Their main guy, Alexander, he seems to be so unconcerned that he refuses to even fight them because he doesn't even think it's a real challenge. So that's the setup, and let's dig into this movie a little bit before we get into storyline spoilers, because I don't want to ruin anything in this film as far as the storyline and the surprises, because there's a couple of them. There's some good writing here. So Stuart Gordon did our previously reviewed movie, Space Truckers. Both of these films, he wrote the story and then got somebody else to help him with the screenplay. But there's a whole bunch of similarities here. It's Stuart Gordon's fingerprints are all over this thing, and it just jumps out at you when we're comparing both of these movies together. And just like in Space Truckers, with Stuart Gordon getting lucky with Charles Dance and Dennis Hopper, he got real lucky in Robot Jocks with Paul Koslow and Gary Graham. So you'll recognize Gary Graham. I mean, he's been in a ton of things. He's a solid B-list actor. I mean, he's a character actor. He shows up in these one-off TV shows and stuff. He's been keeping busy, obviously, when you look at his credits. I mean, the guy's got over 100 credits on IMDb alone. So right after Robot Jocks, he did Alien Nation, which was okay. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so anything Star Trek related on these IMDb lists that just jumps out at me. Like he did an episode of Voyager, did a whole bunch of episodes of Enterprise as Ambassador Sobol. Again, middling, it's okay. He's got that great voice. He looks like a guy in authority, but ultimately just another flavor character. Gary Graham is just not quite what you would call, a leading man, but he got his shot in this one, and he did okay. There's always that debate between, is it the material or is it the actor? Is it bad direction? Is it good direction? What is the ultimate sauce here that's coming out? What's the equation to produce a complete performance? In that regard, Gary Graham, he does it okay. It's fine. It's an okay job. It's not great. There's not going to be anything special about his performance. There's not even really in that great scenes or whatever. His co-stars completely steal the show all the time because you got Paul Koslow, who is just killing it as the Russian, He's got great lines. He's got a great accent. He just shows up all the time. He's a great nemesis to Achilles, and he does it with a little bit of style too. I like it. He's well written, and he takes the material and does everything he can possibly do with it to stand out. And he creates the memorable moments in the movie. Speaking of Star Trek connections, there's a little minor scene with Jeffrey Combs. I mean, Jeffrey Combs is everywhere, but of course he's in Enterprise too, as Commander Shran. Fantastic role. He's also in Deep Space Nine as a recurring character, but that's far less memorable. At any rate, he's only in Robot Jocks for like 2 seconds anyway. Then we've got Michael Aldredge as Tex Conway, the coach, a former Robot Jock himself. Plays this overly crazy Texan thing. I don't know what Hollywood and their over stereotypes with Texans. It's off-putting. I mean, I'm a Texan myself. In fact, I live in Dallas. You know, and these kind of stereotypes, it's very bizarre because people sit there and think that that's what Texans really are when you go overseas, especially. Well, even within the United States, people think, you know, oh, you're from Texas, you've got a horse and a hat and boots, which is only half true. Very few people actually own horses. Anyway, Tex Conway is like the show Dallas version of Texans, this overly dramatic thing, but he does a really good job. Then we've got Danny Kamakona as Dr. Matsumoto. He does a good job as well. In sharp contrast to Space Truckers, which is basically a one-man show plus Charles Dance, Robot Jocks has got several characters, and they're all advancing the story, and they've all got their own interests, and they're all colliding together, and it makes the story a lot more interesting. In Space Truckers, you've basically just got Dennis Hopper as John Canyon, Charles Dance as the crazy scientist, and they're really the only two people fighting. Everybody else is a side character of very little importance that doesn't really register for anything and adds very little to the story. Whereas in Robot Jocks, all these people, you don't know who's going to come out on top. What you can tell from Robot Jocks and these characters is that all of them are trying to win, and everyone's got a different opinion about what it takes to win. Tex Conway is the coach. He thinks winning is getting lucky, and it's being prepared, and it's being top physical shape, and just get out there and just browbeat them to death. Dr. Matsumoto, he thinks the way to win is secret weapons, secret strategies, great tactics. He reluctantly acknowledges luck as a factor in the outcome of these battles. Achilles thinks the way to win is to rely on his staff. It's not just a one man out there, it's coach, it's his technology, it's everything. And critically, of course, he doesn't think that these tubies have a chance to compete at all with people like Alexander. Speaking of tubies, we've got Anne-Marie Johnson as Athena, another working actress which has gotten tons of gigs. It's all over the place on this. Over 100 credits again on IMDb. All these people just are all over the place. They're all working actors. Even though she's playing a character that's obviously supposed to be, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 maybe, tops. In the movie, at the time period, 1989, she's already 29, maybe even 30 by 1989. So it's amazing. This woman just does not age. So she's playing as Athena as one of the tubies, and she's obviously at the top tier of this little group here that's slated to be the next Robot Jocks once Achilles finishes all of his fights. Since all the rest of the Robot Jocks have been killed, the only people that are left that are capable of commanding and piloting the robots are these tubies. In her character, she's playing the young soldier role. The fight's not over until someone wins, until someone dies. Victory at all costs. There is no such thing as luck. So let's address the elephant in the room. These are robots piloted by Robot Jocks. They're gigantic robots. Where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, the Venerable Mech Warrior. We've all played Mech Warrior. Everybody knows what Mech Warrior is. This is a movie about Mech Warriors, basically, without using the title. The only real difference between the game and this movie is the stakes, and that you're not playing like a Mech Warrior. It's like a smaller robot that you're piloting, whereas in Robot Jocks they are gigantic robots. Lots of them being on the battlefield at the same time. It's just two. They're engaged in solo combat, but everything else is there. You know, upgrading, changing out weapons, changing out styles. Within Robot Jocks, the robots themselves, they go through iterations between battles, trying to get that little edge. So MechWarrior, the video game that we're probably all familiar with, that's 1989 as well, same year as this movie. So which came first? Stuart Gordon's infinitely wise vision and endlessly creative storytelling, or MechWarrior? Obviously it takes some time to make a game, so if it came out in 1989, it was probably in development before that. Same thing with Robot Jocks, so it takes some time to make a movie. It was probably being made before 1989, maybe 1988, something like that. But ultimately, I'm going to put it on MechWarrior because the tabletop game came out in '86. So, Robot Jocks is a sci-fi movie. Let's talk about the tech in Robot Jocks. So, while Stuart Gordon probably maybe played the MechWarrior tabletop game and drew some, let's say, inspiration from it, he obviously missed out on Star Trek: The Next Generation, which was out, I believe, in its second season by the time this movie came out. And I say that because in Star Trek, you walk up to a door and it opens on its own. But in Robot Jocks, it seems that everything is controlled with a little remote control, which makes sense for things like his car, but doesn't make any sense for things like doors. It's just silly from a sci-fi perspective in general. I mean, who wants to walk around their apartment or their house holding a little remote control all the time just to get the door to open? I mean, there's tons of remote controls. It's like that must have been some kind of brand new thing or something that Stuart Gordon expected to be widespread but still stuck in the 80s by 2091 when this movie is set. So these remote controls are all over the place, and they do all kinds of small things and big things, like the car, for example, again. But somehow we can't get these remote controls to work on the robots. Those have to be manually piloted for some reason. I don't know. It could be part of the rule set by the referees. It's not explained, but within the same universe as the movie, obviously the robots should be able to be remote controlled. I mean, the pilot himself is in some ways remotely controlling all of the various pieces of it from the cockpit, so it makes sense that he could probably control the rest of it, even if they had to run a long cable out to it. But everything else in the movie seems to work just fine, being remote controlled from little handheld devices. So there's very little in this movie in the way of flair, unlike Space Truckers. Space Truckers, you had flair, I mean, everywhere. There was style, there was design, there was colors, there was pop, there was interesting things to look at, little things everywhere. I don't know if it was intentional by Stuart Gordon to do it this way in this one, because there's very little to look at. This is a vision of the future which is extremely bleak. Everyone is poor, everything is bland, there's just big, solid colors everywhere. All the architecture is this brutalist concrete. The lighting in the movie strongly suggests that something is wrong with the air or the sun or something, that it's overly hot. And so at first you're thinking, oh, this is because the scenes are taking place in Death Valley. They reference that many times. That's where the robot fight is happening. That's their particular location for that particular fight. So you're thinking maybe this has got to do something with Death Valley, but no, it carries over to everywhere else in the universe as well. It's everywhere you go. It's like this. It is not just Death Valley. The characters make repeated references to the air quality, other aspects. There's a good scene with them having meat for a meal. It's funny. But at the same time, see, the only thing that's really popping out at you are these propaganda posters, and you see them. It's a recurring theme. They pop up all over the place, but nobody ever mentions them. These propaganda posters are suggesting people get pregnant, that they have their kids. There's a scene, I believe it's his sister, and she's pregnant again, and she says that that's part of doing her part, which is confusing because it seems like everyone's exceptionally poor. There doesn't seem to be any shortage of people. In fact, it looks like it's pretty overcrowded. Very few resources to go around. That doesn't really seem like a situation where you'd want to have more people, especially encouraging it. You're probably trying to get rid of people at that point. I mean, if the air quality sucks, probably due to pollution, people's clothes are all ratty and stupid, nobody can afford meat, even people that are fairly well off. Living conditions are obviously crowded because she says that when she's got that extra kid, then they'll be able to go into a 3 bedroom place, 2 people per room. Maybe they're facing some kind of demographic collapse. That's not, but they don't show that. They don't mention that. And obviously, you don't need more soldiers of a particular age or anything because all the fighting is done by robots. Maybe there's a tiny throwaway line that explains away some of these things that I just missed, but I doubt it because I've seen this movie a dozen times. So now we're going to start getting into some spoilers. So before the spoilers, I do recommend this movie. So if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a long time, go check it out. It's a good one. So now with the spoilers. So Stuart Gordon did Space Truckers, Robot Jocks, and the two similarities are holding up again in this regard that the endings for both of these movies suck. They both start off so well, they both look so good, everything is working, the actors are working, the dialogue is working, the scenes are working, the storyline is progressing, there's some surprises, there's memorable lines, there's memorable visuals. Stuart Gordon is doing a really great job for like the first 2/3 of this movie, for both of them, in fact. But then this last third, this conclusion, this arc, it goes into Stupidville again. It doesn't make any sense that these robots can go into space, for example. And when they do go into space, they fight a little bit, but not really that much. And all that's accomplished is a little bit of damage, and then they re-land again. So when I was watching this again, I'm thinking, okay, maybe what Achilles is doing is he's trying to lead Alexander out of the Death Valley fight area and into another place where he's got more advantageous terrain. Maybe a place where he can use his little tank conversion thing on his robot and more effectively than what Alexander's four-legged robot thing can do at that in that particular fight. But no, when he lands, he goes right back to the same spot. We know this because the hand of the robot, Alexander's robot, that he cuts off at the beginning of the fight, when they land, he runs back over to that same hand and he uses that to finish the fight to finally defeat Alexander. So he didn't go to another place. He went up into space, they flew around, he took some damage as maybe an excuse to do the tank conversion thing, and they land right back in the same fucking spot. So this animatronic thing or stop motion, whatever they're doing with the robots, it's good. The visuals are great. They feel big. They feel gritty. There's a couple of good scenes there where they're really trying to show off the sheer size of these things. And of course, in dramatic fashion, when Achilles' robot falls over into the crowd, which is another stupid scene, unfortunately. It's like I get it. It looks like he was going to maybe save some people because it looked like Alexander's hand thing was going to go into the crowd to kill a bunch of them. But then when he steps in front of it and gets hit, and his robot falls back onto the crowd, he kills way more people. I get it. He tried and he failed and everything, but there doesn't seem to be any consequences from his actions. In fact, when the referees are trying to decide who won the fights, and they're having their little council, while they listen to the story and they think it's interesting, they completely disregard it as having any impact in their decision making. And then is Achilles punished or something by accidentally killing all those people? No. In fact, the only consequence it seems to have on anybody is that Achilles makes sure that the next time he fights that there is no crowd. I mean, he could have said that without killing anybody. If he didn't want the crowd around, if he thought it was a dangerous thing to have the crowds in the first place. All I want is there not to be any crowds, because the last time there was crowds, I killed a whole bunch of people for no reason. Thanks, Achilles. There's a scene with a very specific reference to Achilles not being able to read. I don't know what the point of that scene is. It's never mentioned again. It never comes up again. He seems to be operating within this society just fine without being able to read. Is everything inside the robot just like pictograms and images and stuff and little shapes? I mean, the guy is smart enough to understand how to do everything in the robot, from all the different weapons and all the different coordinations and all the technology, but he can't read? That just doesn't make any sense. Plus, like I said, it never comes back up. So why even mention it? Are we trying to get more empathy for our character Achilles? Is he trying to demonstrate that piloting the robot does not require intelligence or knowledge, that it's more of a feel kind of thing? How would somebody like this even get involved with the Robot Jocks program in the first place? I mean, is there smaller things? Is he a veteran from all the wars or something? The intro does appear to have several broken large robots, like the debris from them. I mean, I suppose that's possible. He is an older person, and they repeatedly mention that in the movie too. But it's not explicitly said. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Another major cringe moment in this movie comes when they keep saying crash and burn to each other. Kind of like break a leg. I mean, I get it. Crash and burn, haha. It might be get a wink or a smile or a grin or something, but they repeatedly say it. They must say it 24 times. And by then, it's worthless. And it gets on your nerves, and there's cringe, just dripping cringe. I don't know why they keep saying it. It's almost offensive. Some of the sets and some of the setups are also just awful. For example, there's a scene with the Tubies when they're going through some kind of trial or something. There's a whole bunch of them in the room, and they're trying to climb onto this thing to get to the goal at the top. I don't know what bearing that has on anything for them, for determining who's getting ahead. Just seems like a really great opportunity for a whole bunch of them to get injured, and obviously a couple of them do, because they show up in later scenes and they're all like they're in casts. But regardless, that seems to be the scene where they're showing you that Athena is the one that's coming out on top. I mean, we can all pretty well figure that out anyway, just from the screen time and her kicking everyone's ass and the martial arts and the judo and everything. So that scene, it's silly. I mean, specifically, all that random shit happens to them as they're trying to climb up it, but Athena still doesn't think that luck has anything to do with anything, even though that room and that whole situation just screams, hey, I got lucky. Because she wasn't even going to win. That other guy was going to win. But at the last moment, he has a wrong step, and he falls, and then she's the one who wins. I mean, there's nothing going on in that scene except for luck. but she still refuses to believe that there's luck and that luck would be a factor in being a successful robot jock. Why do these 2Bs think that there's so many of them? I mean, obviously, if each one is doing 10 fights, and it's referenced that Tex is the only one who's completed his 10 fights, and there's, what, a dozen 2Bs running around, it stands a chance that, hey, maybe you're not going to survive, and the only way that you have survived is through sheer luck. But they're obviously brainwashed soldiers that are just grown for just this purpose, so maybe them considering that they could just accidentally die just because something weird happens is probably not great for morale. So speaking of multiple characters having lots of things to do, which is really great, is this whole spy arc that seems to be central to the movie. In retrospect, it's obvious now that Tex was the spy because it could only be two of them. It's either Doctor or it's Tex, right? Because at some point they say, well, only two of us knew about it and I'm not the spy. Sure, Tex. In this sequence and in a couple of other sequences in the movie, there's extreme close-ups of people's faces doing dialogue, and they're all good. They're good because these actors are really trying, you can tell. In sharp contrast again to Space Truckers, where nobody seemed to care. Like Dennis Hopper's character, he's just being Dennis Hopper, and Charles Dance, his character, he's just being Charles Dance. It's the same roles that they play in all kinds of other movies. But the characters in Robot Jocks, they're actually being actors. So at the end of the movie, the big conclusion, again, Stuart Gordon has failed miserably again to wrap this up in any kind of coherent way, and ruins the carefully constructed sci-fi world that was good. At the end of the movie, Achilles jumps in the robot that Athena has taken from him, a terribly crippled robot, and he continues to fight Alexander. And he goes back and forth with Alexander, and eventually they defeat each other's robots, and they're just fighting one-on-one on the ground, man to man. Then Achilles gets some kind of heart thing going on after I guess he thinks maybe he's defeated Alexander, because it's kind of unclear. Maybe Alexander's got a little bit more fight in him, but I suppose Achilles has got the upper hand there at the very end. He's trying to reconcile with Alexander to stop fighting. We can live. We can survive this whole mess. Let's be friends. It's not a battle to the death. Which is confusing, you see, because he was telling the 2Bs that he was upset with them, that they were taking it way too seriously. That it doesn't have to be to the death. You don't have to be a soldier. You don't have to kill everybody. But at the same time, he's the one who, after the fight was concluded between Athena and Alexander, when Athena's robot was defeated, he's the one that runs out there and gets back in the damn robot. And he's trying to defeat Alexander. So his character goes through a weird, like, 10-minute phase there where he's against all this, and then he's for it, and then all of a sudden he's against it again. But not only is this poor writing just contained to Achilles, they also drag in Alexander into all this, and somehow in the last moments, Alexander spends the entire movie being a stone cold killer. He's literally on the edge of accomplishing what seems to be his complete life goal, as presented in the movie, of finally killing and defeating Achilles. And he just stops and he just agrees with Achilles that everything should be hunky dory from now on out. I mean, even within the context of the world building here, Alexander could have just simply stopped and then faced him in another time, because it wouldn't have counted as a fight anyway. Because just like the first time that we see Achilles and the robot, I'm willing to bet that the referees say that this is going to be another draw. So then Achilles still has a 10th fight. And it seems like he probably would have done that 10th fight, because obviously the 2Bs are incapable of doing anything remotely close to winning. And of course, Alexander's character would still be there fighting for the Confederation. So is that ending supposed to be is that it? Alexander and Achilles have both stopped fighting, but the fights are still going to be happening. They're just going to be getting other robot jocks to do it. And obviously the market is going to be losing all of those battles because they've got a bunch of worthless 2Bs, and they lost their head scientist, and they lost their head coach, and the Confederation still has their best robot jocks in Alexander. It's an unsatisfying ending, because what is it? Achilles is what? He's just going to go home, he's going to enjoy his retirement, while his nation state completely falls apart to the Confederation because they're just going to keep winning and taking over everything. Alexander is probably going to continue to kill more robot jocks, and if not Alexander, then probably other robot jocks on the Confederation team will probably take tremendous glee in killing additional robot jocks from the market, including all the 2Bs. It's just very unsatisfying. It just seems like Stuart Gordon just said, okay, well, we just need to wrap this up somehow. We're running out of money, we're running out of time. Let's just do this, and we'll just leave the rest up to imagination. So you're thinking to yourself, well, Justin, maybe they're leaving it open for a sequel. There is kind of a sequel, Robot Wars. 1993, but it's like a prequel, and its connection to the source material is really weak. None of the same cast, none of the same people involved in the film, not even the same studio. And there's also another one called Crash and Burn, made in 1990. It was originally titled Robot Jox 2, but this one has literally nothing to do with Robot Jox. I don't know what the title thing is going on there, but it's just nothing to do with it whatsoever. So that's it. Where can you watch Robot Jox? It's going to be a little shaky to try to find it somewhere, maybe pop up somewhere. There's just really the only one reliable place, as you may know. Since there's no more video stores like Blockbuster, you're just going to have to get lucky trying to find it on a streaming service, because even buying the DVD is just outrageously priced. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, still definitely better than the 5.4 rating it's got on IMDb, and you should watch it if you ever get a chance to.